All right, 6 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Full board is Steve via Zoom and Meredith. I see your name, you're on there too.
Yep, I'm here.
Perfect. All right, so the agenda, there's one thing to add to the agenda. Is that added already, Rosemary, or? It's from Meredith, right?
Is that a new meeting day?
Yeah. So we'll add that at the end. We need to do a special meeting for you.
Vermont King Transport Stop.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll add that to the end, and we will improve the minutes. We'll do as we're talking. Anything on that? Anything you're doing, Harvard, Rosemary?
No.
No.
Basically, same as in place.
So treasurer's report.
They need a motion for a minute.
Yeah, so we'll do that with the, so we're looking for October 8th, October 13th, and October 20th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for October 8th.
There's
13th. Come on in.
we get a second on that?
Second.
Any questions? Adjustments? See, Dean, you're all set with the minutes?
Yes,
All right. Seeing no, nobody having any objection to it, all those in favor of approving the minutes for October 8th, October 13th, and October 20th, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
aye.
Chair is aye, it's unanimous, passes. Okay, treasurer's report.
Status reports. Basically, in revenue for the general fund, all we have left outstanding is the pilot money, the amount which should be coming sometime in November. We have the last installment for water bill and bill of the year required calls.
All set with that. So we have a water sewer discharge for Richard Jewett on 112 Little Road West.
We did that last month.
Huh?
So did we do that last month? Oh, okay, never mind. Lien discharge.
Sorry, what was that?
Yes, that's a lien discharge. Water and sewer.
A lien discharge?
Yes,
Okay, so it's all taken care of?
it's been paid. Yep.
Okay, All right, so anybody want a motion to discharge the lien for Richard Jewett for the water and sewer discharge?
Motion to discharge, water and sewer for Richard Jewett.
Give me a second.
I'll second it. I'll second it.
Thank you. And any discussion? Any issues? Seeing none, all those in favor of said motion for discharging Richard Jewett, water and sewer lien at 112 River Road West, say aye.
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 Chair is aye, it's unanimous, passes. And there's another water sewer discharge from Matt Hill at 264 Railroad Street.
Discharge for Matt Hill, 264 Railroad Street.
Do I have a second? Question? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of losing the discharge for water and sewer, Matt Hill at 264 Railroad Street, signify with an aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Chair is aye, and that is unanimous. Excessive water usage, which I saw, here it is. For Brandy Wheeler at 118 Katy Wind Road. 3 bills.
You had a broken pipe underneath the field,
Yeah,
so the water did not go down the sewer drain.
we're looking at 3 times the average of 3 bills multiplied by 3. So that just is the 517, 514.17. Is that just water? Is that water and sewer?
Both.
Both. Is there anything in the policy to allow a reduction on the sewer above that?
Yes, you can use the average for the sewer.
So,
The water is 3 times the,
right, so the water. So do the 3 times the water and then do the average of the sewer for the last 3. Is that correct? Was it, Troy, did you know anybody want to check that out or to make sure it was an actual break or?
I don't.
Yeah,
I think Nate checked it out.
They checked it out,
Yeah,
okay,
'cause he saw the water running right out of the driller,
okay, all
under
right.
the driller.
All right, so what's your guys' pleasure? You guys want to take and do the water 3 times the average and then do the average of the last 3 for the sewer? If it did not impact sewer. Fine. With that, okay, so. I need a
I'm fine with that.
Okay, so who wants to make that motion?
How do you want it worded?
We're gonna do 3 times the average for the water. Times 3, and then the average of the last 3 months of the water.
I'll make the motion, reduce the bill for Brandy Wheeler. 3 times the water and 1 times the average sewer, is that what it was?
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
You get a second on that? Second. Get a second, any discussion?
No.
None, all those in favor of said motion, signify with aye. Aye.
Aye.
And chair is aye, that passes. That's all kosher, right, Rosemary?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so we got Ken Nolan and Ken VEPSA, discussion AMI to provide information about the project, cost benefits analysis, and funding options, and I'm assuming that Meredith will join us on that.
Sure. So I invited Ken Santamore and Ken Nolan from VEPSA to help us just talk a little bit more about the AMI project and the costs and benefits. In the next, I would say, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong, next few months, we're going to be asked to make a decision about whether or not we want to, definitely participate in the project. So I'm hoping they can provide some more details on cost benefit as well as potential financing options. I know the cost is something that we've talked about and they're concerned about. Obviously, it's a big dollar figure. So anyway, I can let Ken jump right in and take over.
Okay, this is Ken Santamore, and I apologize for not being able to be with you there today. We've got a health situation that is causing me to be here. But looking at your packet, I just want to go through this quickly and turn it over to Ken Nolan to look at the overall picture and all the benefits. But what I would like to do is go through a little bit of the history, what we've been doing. This is at this point, a 3+ year effort, as the second slide would point out. And basically looking back, started in late or mid 2018 and had an additional education meeting after hiring Lehouiller Consulting to help step us through this entire process. So 2018, we started with some site visits. We were in Johnson to look at various aspects of the system, existing meters, how old they are, what the terrain looks like, because we do have to cover the service territory with a network, what the CIS system is, a customer information system for billing and all customer related activities. So from there, we rolled into 2019 with those readiness assessments, looking at all of those pieces in a little bit more detail. And then undertook an RFI process where we looked at 11 vendors. From that, 3 vendors were selected: Aclara Technologies, Hometown Connections / Itron, and Landis and Gear. We looked at that with a formal RFP process with a formal scoring system. And those were all evaluated as well by participation from a large group of people made up of village managers, essentially the VEPSA board members, the VEPSA manager, various members of VEPSA staff. So we had a big group looking at it and selected to move forward with Aclara. So if we fast forward to this year, Lehouiller Consulting has completed cost benefit analysis for us, as well as cash flow analysis. And that's included in your packet that you can take a look at. We're not going to really delve down into that too much tonight due to time constraints, but we urge you to take a look at that document. There's a wealth of information there. And as well as that, we're looking at negotiations. We're trying to get the contract between VEPSA and Aclara nailed down now. It's currently in legal review. But a few things about that we can talk about as we move on here this evening. On the next slide, you can basically see what the RS solution is made of. You've got the meters with radios. So each of the meters in your system would have to be replaced with Aclara meters. Those are the former GE meters that Aclara purchased some years ago, as well as water MIUs, meter interface units that would attach to the existing water meter, or you have the option that, since we're going to be attaching this to each of the water meters, to actually replace the water meters as part of this project. From there, it's connected with a point-to-point 400 megahertz network. It actually works in the 450 to 470 megahertz range to get to what Aclara calls a DCU, data collection unit. So all the meters will be pointing to these DCUs. Essentially for the village of Johnson, Eclair expect 6 DCUs spread out throughout your territory. We'll get to that in a moment. From there, it's backhauled to a cloud infrastructure where the Eclair One software. Some of the methods used for that is Verizon or AT&T LTE data networks, or DSL, or in some cases, there may be Velcro fiber running out there that we can attach and use that. So looking at the Eclair One software, essentially that's the heart of the software. It's comprised of components that manage the network, do the data collection, and contain a data management system. So if you go to the next slide, we can look at specifically what Johnson's network would look like. The orange dots that you see are located, you know, to the left, to the furthermost left, you'll see it's on Route 15. The next one, the south part, kind of in the middle of the village, is proposed to be located on a pole behind the fire station.
I'm not sure that we have the slides. Did you send something to us?
Yeah, to Ken Nolan. I'm sorry, I didn't send it to the remote. We were just sending it locally. So the folks in room.
Oh, okay, that's fine.
So I'll
All
make
right, I
sure,
just wanted to make
Meredith,
sure.
that you get a copy. And
That's
I'm
okay,
sorry,
as
that
long
was
as-
kind of an oversight, not knowing who was remote and who was local.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure somebody had them.
Okay.
And really quick, sorry to interrupt. This is Michael from Green Mountain Access. The phone number that ends in 1257, if you press *6, that can mute your microphone because it's currently interrupting Ken's presentation. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So just looking at that, we can see the other locations, including one that's a little bit different. You see the one on the lower right. It's on Collins Hill Road, which actually is in Morrisville Water and Light Service territory. And they'll be saving, you'll be sharing that one with them, or that's the proposal currently. So again, looking at this network, you'll see the blue dots, which are the individual electric meters. We don't have the water meters yet digitized. However, you can look at the water meter as being a subset of those electric meters. And down the left-hand column here, you can see how everything is connected, how I described earlier. And essentially, you can compare this network to your home Wi-Fi. This would be a wide area network connected between devices that are speaking over 450 to 470 megahertz. You can compare that to your Wi-Fi network with your laptop being a meter, contributing at, talking at 2.4 gigahertz or 5.0 gigahertz, where now we're talking 450 to 470 megahertz. So essentially, it's just a large network that's covering your service territory. Moving right along, this slide is very busy. I'm including it basically so you can have an overview of what the heart of the system is. This is the Eclair One software with a unified head-end multi-tenant MDM. MDM meaning meter data management. That's where all the meter reads are going to be stored. Essentially, there's going to be a capability to store 25 monthly 15-minute reads of any metering quantity that the village of Johnson wants to bring back. So essentially that could be kilowatt hour usage, kVAR-H data for reactive power, could be voltages. So all of those quantities can be brought back to the meter data management system in 15-minute demand or 15-minute interval reads. So currently we're getting 1 read per month per customer, which essentially is just their usage. And now you'll have the capability to get back 15-minute reads. And Ken's going to discuss later, after I'm done here, with the overview of what the benefits of that are going to be moving forward. So looking down, you can see who the users are that are going to be interfaced to the units. or to the system. And essentially, we're looking at a hosted solution by Aclara on Microsoft's network or Microsoft's cloud presence or data center. And essentially, we're looking at that because it's essentially allowing the folks that are experts at this job to take care of that for us. There's only 2 of us at the VEPSA office. We're spread thin now with multiple servers. And since this is going to be such a critical server and such a data intensive server, we wanted to leverage Microsoft's and Aclara's capabilities to run those servers for us. The next 2 slides essentially address cybersecurity. This is just to ensure that we've taken a good hard look at what that is. And again, I don't want to get into too many details here, but just to look at the AES 256 encryption, it's encrypted from the meter all the way to the head end on the Microsoft cloud, and a bunch of other aspects of that in terms of encryption and authentication have to occur between those meters. So nobody can just plop a meter on this system and start talking with the head end, or any other device and start talking with the head end. It's got to be manufactured into the meter. So it's a very secure environment. And on the second slide of cybersecurity, we just get into some of the other factors that we're using to ensure the security of our overall environment. So you can take a look at that at some point. If you have any questions, please get in touch with us, either through Meredith or directly, and we can answer those questions. The next slide, and probably one of the most important, is the first year cost estimate. That comes in, you can see, at $306,208 for the Aclara system. That's your share of the head end costs, as well as all of the DCUs and all of the meters, as well as the communication costs between the 2, between the points. Essentially the backhaul, there's costs included in that, as long as we're using LTE, which in Johnson's situation we'll be able to do within these cost structures. And then we go across the columns for various integrations that have to occur. This is essentially labor costs with your existing vendors, as well as Aclara, bringing the total first year estimate to $430,585. That's if we use the existing water meters. If we replace the water meters, Meredith, I believe, has got a quote of around $80,500 to do that. So that would be added on top of these costs, bringing the total to around $511,000 in first year estimates. And then the maintenance and ongoing support costs are down below over the 15-year expected life of the system. So that's the overview. I'd like to turn it over to Ken Nolan now, who I believe is, even though I can't see him on camera, is in the room, and he can talk about the overall effectiveness of this system.
I'm here again. Good evening. Ken Nolan, GM at VEPSA. Apologize for this not being done electronically. We'll certainly go have that share. I want to step back for just a second and kind of put this all in context. So all of the utilities in Vermont, except the VEPSA municipalities, put these meters in 2009. The VEPSA members made a conscious decision back then: too expensive, new technology, wanted to let things sugar off. So we, for the last 12 years, essentially, the state has had these meters in every other utility except the 11 members we deal with. So a couple things have happened. I wouldn't say costs have come down. If you looked at these prices, it's pretty similar to what folks saw back in 2009. But the functionality has moved a lot. You get a lot more information, a lot more capabilities with them than you get in 12 years ago. The other thing that's moved is the state, frankly, across the nation, most regulators assume that these meters are in place now. So when they're passing new laws, it's all premised on the fact that these meters are in place and utilities can do the things that the meters allow you to do. That's more and more putting us at a different disadvantage in trying to react to what's Montpelier is asking us to do. And now we're seeing it coming out of Washington DC as well. There has some expectations that it's going to be very difficult for us to meet if we don't move in this direction. So contextually, I wanted to kind of set that frame. As far as the capabilities here, so this technology moves you from having to send a meter reader out to check the meters every month, or if you're disconnecting power, turning power on, having to send someone to the house. You can do that now remotely using radio signals, combination of radio and fiber optics. So there's operational changes. The staff is now having to go out and read meters and deal with customers to be utilized for other things. And you're still going to need them to do some meter maintenance, but they're now available for other activities and these. Because you're getting 15-minute data, you're getting 15-minute usage on customers for kilowatt-hour usage and also reactive power, which most of your meters do not bring back on. So you can start to see more effectively what losses you have on the system, where you're having hot spots. Linemen have a pretty good idea of what's going on out there, but this allows you to really hone in on what's happening. It also lets you look at transformer loading. So as people are buying electric vehicles, putting in heat pumps, you start to see some of the transformers can get overloaded. You can now see this in advance. It'll allow us to add up the usage on each meter into the transformers and onto the circuits. You get a lot better view on what's happening on your system. You also can automatically bring back voltage information. So every meter will send back the voltage reading it's getting every 15 minutes. So if you're having issues with low voltage or high voltage on your system, you can actually map that out and see where the problems are. So a lot of analytics that you have to either do specialized studies or go on instincts. Now you'll be able to really dive into the details once you have it. Allows us to build an engineering model and keep that up to date as you're changing your system. Another benefit is on the load side. Right now, every day, BEPSA bids into ISO New England for Johnson to purchase power. Part of that, we have to do a load forecast for your system every day. We're using data that's sometimes 10 years old to try to estimate what the load should be. So we're taking historical information, applying weather patterns to it, and predicting what the load is. But this information is getting it every single day what the loads are, and we'll be able to do the forecasting much more accurately, which means you're buying power more accurately to what you need to serve your system, rather than us trying to guess and then having to make adjustments.
Is that for the cost savings?
It could turn in, more likely to turn into cost savings, yes.
Not underbidding or overbidding or, okay.
Yeah. I mean, we're usually on any given day, you're 3 to 5% off. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes you're making money, sometimes you're losing money. But the more accurately we can get the purchase requirement, the more you can manage the budgets. The other thing that's coming, the legislature approved it last year in the transportation bill, is they're requiring every utility to develop time of use rates. And this is particularly for electric vehicles. You have an option as a utility to either put in place time of use rates specifically for electric vehicles or for whole house usage. Very difficult to do that when you've only got one reading a month. So there's a requirement by 2024, every utility is going to have to figure out how to put this time of use rates in place.
What's that?
End of 2024. It's 3 years from now. So this metering allows us to do that pretty easily. The meter data management system that you described, that software is specifically designed so you can set a time of use rate or time period when you want different pricing for customers. And the software will calculate what the usage is for those periods without having to go and visit every single meter and change the periods. Today's technology, the mechanical meters, you have to physically visit every time of use meter when you change that period. Future, we'd be able to gather the 15-minute data and then using software say, well, today, right now we want it from noon to 6 as the on period. A couple years from now, your load shift, and you say, well, no, it's really 2 to 8 we want that. It's a software change. There's no change in the meters that has to occur.
So this 2024 mandate, if we're not able to comply, obviously we don't go to smart meter, if we can't comply. What's the state's ramifications?
Well, we're not sure yet. I mean, right now, none of the BEPSA members have meters. So we're actively looking at what alternatives we can put in place to meet that criteria without having to have advanced metering. To be honest, it's pretty difficult to do that. We're not sure we can comply. There is no real, let's say there's no teeth, but there's also no out if you can't. So what will end up happening is the Public Utility Commission will have to decide how they want to treat it. The legislature didn't put a specific language in as far as a fine or anything like that. But the Public Utility Commission would then open an investigation and figure out what they want to do.
Could have teeth down the road.
It could. Likely will, what those will be or what it'll look like, I'm not sure. And whether we can comply in some other way, it's possible, but I think it's going to be expensive no matter how we do it. Just a couple seconds on the financing, because I know Meredith raised that a few times. A couple things I want to make you aware of. The first is the legislature in the last bill that was passed, the ARPA money that they got, they carved out $100 million for utility investments. They're now talking to all the utilities about how to spend that money. And BEPSA has actively said, we think that portion of those funds should be allocated to our membership to get us to the same point the other utilities got federal funding back in 2009. For those who don't remember, that was part of the ARA funding, and the federal government paid for 50% of the meter cost in 2009. So we're now advocating we should get 50% off using the ARA fund.
These numbers here, the 430, just through electric, that's full load.
That's full. That assumes no money coming from the state.
Okay.
So hopefully, I mean, can't guarantee anything, but we're actively working that right now. So we may be able to present a 50% off to that first year cost. The other thing that we're working on, and this is several of the members that expressed concern with the upfront rights. So we're talking now to our banks, trying to figure out how we can do a loan through BEPSA. So we would carry the debt on our books and turn it into an operating cost, turn it into a monthly charge with life.
They just mentioned electric products again. So 430,000 takes us from where we are to where we need to be. The non-BEPSA members who have been in this for 12 years, is their product also a 15-year life, and how are they looking at their position 3 years from now?
Yeah, they're actually some of them, they didn't see the full 15-year life. They brought into a product, as I said initially, kind of new technology back then. So some of them are already looking at re-upping. Burlington right now is looking at redoing their software, multi-million-dollar investment just to do software and counting meters. Green Mountain Power is in the process of looking at their overall system. They used Elster, which is now a Honeywell product, and they're trying to assess what to do. And everything I'm hearing is they're going to renew that product, stick with Elster, but they're having to refurbish the meters and so on. Once you make the conversion now, it turns into more of a, describe it, it's a rolling replacement. So the initial conversion, you're changing every meter in your system. When you go to replace it, unless you're going to change vendors, you're really just dealing with meters as they fail. So you can expect a higher operating cost over time as more meters fail, but it's not a full all at once.
So with that, so you're saying the cost 12 years ago versus the cost now are relatively the same, hoping it would go down, but it didn't. So we're looking at is that 15 years from now, Or say 12, 13 to 16 or 17 years time span, we'll be saying an additional $430,000 to replace just the meters, is what your current game plan would be.
Well, the 430 include, the 430,000 includes the meters themselves. It includes the labor to do the installs. Some of the integrations, yes.
Okay. So a portion of that, it wouldn't be the full 430. So we're looking more.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to describe is right now you're doing 430,000, but you're going to change everything.
Right.
Going forward, you expect about 1/15 of that cost. Start maybe in year 10, you would start to see some of the meters fail, and then you have to start getting a replacement program. So unless we were literally sitting here and saying, well, in 15 years, we're going to throw the vendor out and start all over again, it wouldn't be that big hit, but you would see an increased operating cost going forward.
So what portion of that 430 is I mean, I'm assuming that our alignment can replace the meters. So what portion of that 430 is the actual meters themselves?
Make sure I didn't miss. And if you go to the slide with the table on it, the cleric cost summary.
Yeah.
306 would be the meter cost itself.
Okay.
Then we're assuming about 50,000, and that's an estimate based on. Ken mentioned Jackie Lehouiller as the consultant we hired. She's worked with municipalities all around New England doing these types of conversions. She estimated based on other projects about $35 per meter to do the installs, and that's using outside contractors. So that's what we've assumed here is 50,000. If you were to do it internal and have your staff do it, it'd be at some cost, whatever you're like.
After additional installation, not replacing meters. So we're looking at 306. Simple prices don't change. Thank you.
So as far as timeline, Ken described, we're in legal review right now of the contract between Clara and Pepsi. Setting this up in a similar way to we our purchase agreements. So there will be a contract with the vendor and Pepsi. We'll manage that relationship. And then we'll have separate agreements between us and each of the member utilities. The lawyers, right now, they're reviewing the Clara contract and also crafting the contract between us and the members. That should be ready mid-December sometime. So we'll expect. Once those contracts are signed, we will be starting to do a return visit. So we're happy to come back and talk further about this. But as Meredith described, end of the year, first part of next year, we're going to start asking people for commitments as to whether they're going to go forward. Johnson is really in the first batch. We're breaking it out to 4 members per year to go forward. Expecting you guys probably will want to delay until 2023. Want to go faster, so we won't do that.
So is Morrisville working around us around the same time, since how we're going to be sharing a responder or whatever it's called?
Yeah, Morrisville right now is slated to be in the first group that goes, so they'll be toward the end of 2022. So we be putting in that collector for them. If this goes to plan, things can change. But, we were anticipating we put in that collector location for Morrisville as part of their rollout in 2022. And then once that's done, you would come in the next group.
Will we know about the money part before we make a decision?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. When we come back to talk to you again, you'll have in front of you the contract between us and Clara, the contract between us and you, proposal on what the financing will look like through us, and all the details as to what the design will actually look like. So Ken's giving you kind of a picture. But we have all the quantities we're anticipating, all the components that would have to go, and you'll have all the information there.
How do you think the numbers will be impacted? I mean, obviously, the more you buy, the better sometimes the pricing is, but if you have members that don't participate, do you anticipate huge changes in the per unit cost type thing?
Great question. So the way Ken has negotiated this, we have a floor that we need to meet. As long as we get more than 10,000 meters, then the prices are fixed. And we need about a third of the members to say yes, meet that threshold. So if we get a low uptake on the members, there's some potential price increase on the software side. But it would take literally like 2/3 of the members to say no. Can't see that.
How many have said yes?
We don't have any official yeses yet, but we have Orleans is ready to go whenever we are. Northfield, Swanton has said yes, other than the official vote. We're meeting with Hardwick. They're leaning. I don't know if you guys deal with Mike Sullivan very much in Hardwick. He tends to go his own way, so he's tried out a bunch of different stuff, and now he's coming back and saying, this is probably the way he wants to go. Talking to Lindenville, they're leaning this way as well. The only members that have indicated caution, Enosburg has said they want to look at it. Although we met with their trustees a week ago, and they were more supportive than I was expecting. And Ludlow, who's got a superintendent who's been around for 40 years. He just doesn't. I think they'll get there eventually, but they will probably be the last. That's the next I mean, frankly, the reality is that you can delay this a little bit, but the legislature is going to force you down this path eventually. You're either going to have to go with the new technology, or you got to seriously start thinking about whether you want to run utility. It's just the way it's going to end up.
That's the part. All right. So that concludes your presentation.
Answer any of the questions?
Yes. Steve, do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you for the presentation.
All right, Meredith, anything you want to add, or?
No, I don't think so. I think, they gave you the information I was hoping they would, and we'll have to have a few more discussions in the next few months.
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you so much. I appreciate you in person and the safety on the other guy. And yeah, it's like we're being told we need to go. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Oh yeah, you'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, wastewater report.
Alrighty, on wastewater end, EDMR and WR43 were submitted to the state. We replaced the fuse on the UV system that was causing 3 racks in the bulbs to not operate properly. We repaired a worn out solenoid on the sludge wasting pump. We used old parts from one we had on the shelf. We're trying to source a new one. Stuff's old, but it's challenging for sure. So we can have one on the subject. There's 3 solenoid valves on there that we use, and we have no spare parts at this point.
So if you can't find spare parts, what's that?
Then there should be a new valve, probably different type of, different vendor valve.
Yeah.
And then find out. We can find one of the same that way. You just replace parts. And there's a solenoid that operates the valve and there's the valve itself. So we had a spare of both. Now we've got nothing.
Okay.
The fire extinguishers for the wastewater plant, water plant, pump stations were past inspection. Fluke assisted Wind River with jettering and vacuuming the sewer lines throughout the village. We tested the floats at the siphon at the same time. I'm going to give Mosh down here to jet the siphon. We've done it the last couple of years, and it's saved emergency callouts. So we usually have to go in the fall after the jetting, so that way it cleans it out for winter in shape.
What's he charged for the jetting?
Like $150 last time. Well, where's that?
So I'll call out.
Yeah. Yeah, because then I gotta tell these guys out to come down and lift the manhole cover
Yeah.
off. And
Yeah.
So, we removed and repaired the belt adjusters on the sludge belt press that were sticking. We're slowly, as we can, no cost stuff, just having to go through that. When he's replaced next year. Belt press. On the water slide, coliform results were negative. Lucas is the village through with hyper flushing. We had 2 butterfly valves that failed on the filter system at the water plant, causing water loss down the drain. It was basically when they go to back flush, instead of containing it, it was going right down the pipe and going right back to the wastewater plant. And they both failed at the same time. Took a couple days to figure it out, because you're not down there very often when it's running, so you can hear it going. And so we did figure that out. We did have some water loss last month, but we'll get you later because of that. But we got them both ordered, and then it was about $500 for both of them, but it stopped the problem. So Champlin installed a new Verizon communication radio at the water plant. That seems to have taken care of the communication issue between the water plant and the reservoir. We haven't had any issues whatsoever. We actually get a rating every day on the connections, and it's been 100% for the last 9 days now since they did that. So hopefully that will take care of that issue. They also installed a new radio with a siphon. As Verizon and AT&T go to 5G, they're discontinuing 3G and 4G, and all those radios are 3 and 4G.
Yeah.
So in January, when AT&T switched over, that was going to be dead. So he was here in town, said, might as well save on labor and replace it now. So we replaced that one. About $250 a radio for those 2. So but they weren't going to be cheaper.
That's kind of allowed it.
Exactly. The water loss was 24%. Some of that was due to that we were losing down the drain, and also we did hyper flushing this month. So
Okay.
that's unaccounted for also. So
Yeah.
I think that puts us below the 20% threshold for sure, which kind of
Right. What was it? The last month it wasn't
it
bad.
was 25 or 6 last month, but we had that communication issue, which was causing it to say it was running when it wasn't. So it was calculating down even though we weren't actually pumping it.
We're actually-
So once we figured out that that was an issue, we're taking our readings from a different place now, off the actual meter, not off of the emission page.
Okay.
Because that has a little widget, basically when it calls for it, it says that it's pumping 210 gallons, whether the pump comes on or not. Well, having the pump wasn't coming on because of the communication issue. So they were saying we were pumping one, but we really never pumped. So that's why, and some of that carried over into this month.
Now it's at the meter, you said.
What's that?
Now it's at the meter.
Now we're doing it right off of the filter press panel, which that's actually, I mean, it's per gallon right off of the filter.
Okay.
Yeah, but more accurate, just one of those living learn things that, until it fails, you didn't know it was reground. That's all I've got for this month.
And you serve an action item.
What's that?
So it's wastewater report and action item.
I think that's. Yeah, I don't think we have any.
All right, perfect. Just wanna
And I
make
just
sure.
talked to Ken too, he's gonna come down at some point and we'll look at that Q plus and we can kind of get a write up on what we want to put that up for this winter, but probably
Yeah,
shoot for that for the first of the year.
Yeah. I think getting out there this winter is a good idea. Before we talk.
I figured it's a good way to talk to them. And
Yeah. You might know a little bit better.
Might,
Use the resources you have.
exactly.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And
And Meredith will talk to you about the, maybe update. I need to be here for that, so.
okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Enjoy your evening.
Have a good night.
Thank you. All right.
In the electric department, on October 19th, we had an outage which affected approximately half of the village on the R1 circuit due to trees coming down on a 3-phase line on College Hill. The trees removed, repairs were made, and power was restored. The majority of the people on the circuit were affected by an outage that lasted about 30 minutes. The rest of the customers on College Hill lasted about 2 hours. On November 3rd, we had a tree come down on a line on Plot Road, which resulted in an outage that affected 20 customers. The tree was removed and power was restored in about half an hour. Also on November 3rd, we sent 2 of our line workers in our large bucket to assist Hyde Park with a new lake call that consisted of changing out a broken pole with multiple underground customers on it. The crew worked approximately 18 hours with Hyde Park. I'm in the process of creating an invoice to submit to Hyde Park for our staff time and truck usage. We energized a secondary service for new garage at Katie Wind Park. We also energized a new 200 amp service for bed and waterman. We worked with Gould Electric installing conduit for a new 600 amp service at the Studio Center in Red Mill. We also continued our in-house right-of-way cutting, as well as monthly meter reading, high load checks, and dig safes. In the water sewer, on the week of the 25th, we worked with H2O members to clean the sewer mains in the village and the Highland Heights pump station. We removed all the seasonal water meters in the village for preparation for winter. On November 7th, we reported, on November 7th, we received a report of low water pressure at mobile home in Katie Wind Park. We responded and determined that the issue was on the property owner's end. In the general department, both bobcats and winter equipment have been serviced for winter. All village furnaces were cleaned. Winter sand has been stockpiled. The crew replaced the water pump at the cold spring, and all stormwater receivers were cleaned during the week of October 25th. Safety, the crew completed NEPA's monthly safety class. This class covered distribution line breakers and sectionalizing equipment. Rubber gloves and sleeves were sent out for 3 months testing, and insulating blanket used for live line work were sent out for 6-month testing. I continued working with the engineer from RSM Construction Group related to the EV chargers going in at the Jolly store. We should be receiving payment shortly for that job. They're planning on beginning the prep work in December as we wait for the delivery of the transformer. We're working with Ken Harvey's electrician, planning the installation of 3 new 200 amp services on Park Street. I work with Gould Electric supervisor, planning the new 600 service that'll feed the Red Mill building. I also work with local property to discuss the water sewer service and permits for their property at 36 School Street. And I've scheduled a site visit with Pearson Consulting. We'll meet with their staff at the village garage tomorrow and start evaluating what's going on there as far as some more issues. But one of the things I'd like to talk about, I brought forward last month about visiting the site at the Manchester property and looking at those catch basins there, which we determined, had nothing to do with the village. I'd like to just go over what I read in the minutes from November 1st in the select board meeting. And I guess I want to publicly clarify some comments that were made in section 14 related to the Manchester stormwater infrastructure. Those minutes suggested that the town foreman had to handle the issue by himself, all by himself. This is not correct. Nate and I traveled to the site and reviewed the infrastructure in place. I arranged then to go to the site with the town foreman. The morning of the planned visit, we agreed to meet at the village garage first. When the town foreman arrived, he indicated we did not need to travel to the site together since we both independently gone on our own and were in agreement that the structures had nothing to do with the village. Again, it is incorrect to suggest that the village did not participate in the review of this infrastructure, and it is unclear to me why my participation was mischaracterized by the select board. And that's all I have to say.
And I was also going to bring that up, so I read that in a minute. And I know Troy said that we were supposed to. Okay.
Thank you for your report, Troy, and thanks for clarifying your meeting with the town foreman. Anybody have any questions for Troy? Bill says Steve?
No, yeah, I'm good.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you very much, Troy. Appreciate it.
You all set with me, Will, or?
I am.
You do.
Fire department report for September 30th to October 28th. Responded to 5 calls. 3 calls occurred during the daytime, 2 calls during the nighttime. The average duration was 62 minutes. The nature of the calls, there were 4 calls that were automatic alarms, 1 CO alarm. The average number of firefighters who responded was 11. Total number of service hours was 11. Rescue 1 and Engine 1 completed annual service state inspections at Clark's Truck Center. Our fire department report.
Are they still looking for volunteers?
I think they're looking all the time.
They're always- I mean, it's, we obviously, it's my understanding that they always take applications.
Have we had any? Have we had any applications?
We have. Yeah, we've got a gentleman who's going to be joining us first part of the year. And we also have a junior firefighter joining first part of the year. So. All right. Okay, Brownfield report, Melanie Riddle. Excellent.
Here, I know you guys have reviewed the report that was done back in 2017 at the area wide. So, questions, so we can clarify on that. I know so very you guys are looking at the town garage about what you're going to be doing. So,
Yes, my two questions are, the same report for 2017, read years ago. Has Bob Putvain been spoken to, and has Mr. Manchester been spoken to?
no, that's not, no, we haven't done anything update from that.
Okay. And as far as the village and town jointly owned property, I do think we've got to deal with the garage issue and what space we need for that. I personally would love to see the plan for the town and village need of that property, and that's something done with the rest of it. Initially, it was to be put on the market and sold, but I guess the town payers voted to keep it at that time. So I think that's where that benefit stuff stands. Does anybody else have any questions?
Well, just for the record, I did invite the Hoags and the Manchesters to come to tonight's meeting, because in the report, it does say that one of the things that has to happen is that the owners of the land need to be notified and talked to before anything can be done, of
Yep.
course.
Yeah, that was 5 years ago.
And you know what happened 5 years ago, once they informed Mr. Hawaii about it?
Pardon?
Do you know what happened 5 years ago, once they informed Mr. Hawaii about it?
I know that it was kind of a mess,
Yeah.
but going forward, I called him, left a message for him to come tonight. And I think it's really, this report is really for having our town move forward in some direction.
I understand that, but I spoke to Mr. Hawaii too. He said, no,
I don't think so.
to get his property.
And I mean, people,
I think he told everybody that 5 years ago.
Yeah.
it
not
just
mistaken.
sounds so hostile that, you know.
Well, I mean, I understand, but I'm just saying that if you guys developed a plan for my property without ever speaking to me, I'd sell it to somebody
Well,
else.
first of all, it wasn't Dee's plan.
No, I'm just saying.
Please let me make that clear.
The plan, I'm not blaming Dee's.
She's just trying to bring it back to the table and see what we can do.
Yep.
What options we can have to do with it.
I'm just saying that, right,
Yeah, so
from what
anyways.
I've been told, Diane, is that we need to get away from the Hawaii because he's not the only one. So that was basically where it was going with that.
Okay,
that's all.
so we can eliminate that, if that is what he thinks, but we have 2 other sites.
Right.
That we can potentially discuss and hopefully move forward. I would kind of like to know what our first steps would be in moving forward, in picking a site, what we would need to do, and let's move forward. But I think we need to be on board with deciding something, because we have those 2 sites available to us possibly.
Well,
So let's discuss it.
Right.
And let's have Melanie help us move forward. But first of all, we need to say, okay, let's try it. We need to say that.
I could to back it up. I mean, I know I've heard the same thing from Mr. Hoag. So obviously that's, that was a misstep back then, and we don't want to redo that again. But I think reaching out to Mr. Manchester to see if he's interested in participating in this, obviously, because without his participation, there's no, that property is a non-issue. And then as far as the joint property, now does that require a town and village discussion? So, are you in a position to reach out to Mr. Manchester? Or that's something that this board should do? What's your thoughts on that?
I'm actually convening the Brownfield committee. I'm from the village council committee as well, and that's basically municipalities, trying to build in there. Different years, and talk about different brownfield properties in Loyal County, and they are the ones that actually decide the recommendation to the LCC board that then they could get funding with, because we have about $50,000 current state and additional $50,000 after that could be used for the assessment process and that needs to happen in each property. So kind of that's the initial piece, is like getting interest, reaching out to property owners and walking through the process. For the town and village property, I would highly recommend trying to get into what's called the umbrella program, which is the liability program. If you're looking at doing something on the property, you really kind of want that protection against liability if something was discovered in the process of, rehabbing the building or doing something with it, whatever kind of comes of that, what decided by the village. That was something else.
Now, as far as the brownfield project, that's going to cover the area that will only be relevant in the area where the mill was. The additional property wouldn't fall under that scope, right?
Well, we don't know without doing the phase 1 assessment, because there have been historical things that have happened based on that data gap report, which has been part of the. There could be additional things that each or we're not aware of on that property. So we can't know that without doing the full phase 1 assessment.
So if we were to go, a quarter mile down the road on the property, still contiguous property, and there's no contaminants found of that, it would not qualify in this brownfield.
So it's not technically categorized as a brownfield until it's had a phase 1 assessment.
Okay.
So that's something. So it's basically just a property that has had manufacturing different things on it. And so you can't say that it does or does not.
Okay.
Without looking at it further.
All right.
Suspicion.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure it's messed up before it comes into under the umbrella of the brownfield. Okay.
Yeah.
So again, I'd like to clarify something real quick. I'm not against any of this. I just don't like to see us alienate any of our residents by coming up with a plan for the property without discussing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we made that mistake once. We
Yeah.
we definitely don't want it again. Doug, I appreciate your patience.
Thank you. I wanted to say that when this report was written, Parker Sturge was an operating entity. Parker Sturge might be, if there were ability to enroll in this, should the circumstances fit them, whether their current owner, that very well might be beneficial to them. And I agree that, I was there for the meeting with and I understand that this whole system is dependent on that an owner finds it beneficial and wants to be involved. Now, I'm actually wondering, when you go forward with we've got some problems, with the village building, and I wonder when we go forward with that, given that we have actually split ownership and probably need a tighter organizational operating agreement for that. I would think that you might very well everybody might want to run through and get whatever protection you can and be in as good a position for getting grants with clean slate type stuff as you possibly could. So I would really suggest that you engage with the select board, get their position on it, and the important, one of the important things about this report is that we have a significant asset down there, and we have a 6th Street, and if you change the nature of that street, and the rail trail looks like it might be a possibility of bringing in people, especially when we get broadband into the rest of our area. Johnson can really flourish, and this street, I believe, can be changed. And one of the things, so I'd like to have you, I'd like to figure out what sort of capacity the boards need to figure out what sort of capacity you need to enter into this. Do you have the ability at the town and village level to pursue this through volunteers? Paired with LCPC and LEC help. And then I'd really like you to pick up and somebody go to the state and register a trade name and register Johnson. If you read the recommendation, that should be there.
Yeah.
And I reckon, you don't have to end up using it, you just need to have it, is what I would say. And so have the meetings, have the plan, have the joint village and town meeting, pick out properties that you think might be helpful, and investigate and see if this would be beneficial. That's what I would say.
Okay. So the funds you were speaking of that are available, what is the nature of the funds? What's maybe is that just to do an assessment, or is that to do what's?
So the process is a phase 1 assessment. They go through the property records to determine further study that was done to kind of figure out where did they need to test and what could be other potential.
Okay.
And then after that, phase 2 assessment. Both of those through the funds. And the phase 2 assessment is where they actually go out testing.
So like more testing, is that?
That's
Okay.
Or whatever is required.
Right. Okay. And that's is there a match, or is that a 100% grant?
It is, I believe, I haven't gone through one myself, but it's much. Sounds small amount, or basic property funding is for property, so it's also for property.
Right. So that'd be private citizen property, or is that would that?
Yeah.
Say, so municipal property wouldn't be covered under that.
No, it can be.
It can be. Okay. All right.
Yeah, so it's basically for the property owner, so that kind of the whole point is to deal with any, but that's the point of funding. So, state says want to see all of this stuff cleaned up, and so the property can be used.
Okay, so let's suppose we move forward with the village and town. We decide where we need our garage, or we're going to rehab, or what we're going to do with that. We decide to build on the same property. Obviously, we go out, we reach out to you, we get the funding to do the phase 1, phase 2. We find contaminants. Then where are we?
So then the funding that we have doesn't cover the plan, but basically by doing phase 1 and phase 2, you open up the possibility for other funding. You've gone through the process. You enter into the umbrella, which gives you the protection program if you're not viable. That's a slightly better protection to a purchaser, but it still gives you the ability to get what's called compliance and once things have been completed. And so it gives you the timeline for phase 1, phase 2, and then creating corrective action plan. That's a different set of funding. We can help you apply for that. It's just not the same funding, but there's other funding streams available.
So you guys are on the same team, right?
She's gonna run the meeting, and I'm gonna be there as an advocate for the village and town. That's the pitch I made to you.
Yeah. I just wanted.
Yeah.
I want to see where the.
Yeah.
Doug over here.
I'm part of the advisory committee.
Right.
And I'm gonna try to avoid being an elected official. I would wonder if you could inquire of Brian Sawyer what he thinks the towns, if they'd be a participant. I assume they would, but.
Yes, the town would, be interested in having discussions about what we could do with that property.
Perfect. How long does phase 1 and 2 usually take?
Phase 1, let's see, just in 1 thing, I think it was about a month or so. Phase 2, I've only seen the report.
Probably
Yeah.
depends on how much they gotta do.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
pour one
The
hole
phase one.
today, you know, they gotta do 400 holes, it's gonna take a couple days. So,
Yeah, and then my role on the committee is I'm a facilitator and coordinate all of these things.
so you're representing the village and town. Yeah. Perfect.
Well, I'm a representative, and I have in mind your needs.
Yeah, right, yeah, perfect. So I guess at this point here, unless I'm totally off mark, we probably should have a meeting with the town and kind of explore what we both agree upon, where to move forward with this. Do you concur?
I think that would be great.
Okay. All right, let's what days are you available? Wednesday, Friday. Wednesdays and Fridays. Yeah. DJ's available Wednesdays and Fridays generally. So if you can reach out to your board and to see if we can come up with a Wednesday, Friday, a couple of options to build a meet on this, and
Sure.
anything else that we need to do at the same time, so we're not wasting time. And just get a little Rosemary, or just get her email us all and let us know, and we'll get back to you and maybe at least we get 3 members to meet. Board, and then we can kind of get a consensus. Would you mind coming to that meeting? Yeah, and you got to come too.
I'm supposed to be a neutral broker when I
But you are advocating. If she's gonna be there, you gotta be there, because you're advocating for all of this. So that that's like a forward motion for everybody to bid this thing, either do something with it or pitch it. So if we don't do something, we're not gonna know what we're gonna do, so. All right, I think everybody seemed moving forward on this. Perfect. Any other questions for Melanie or Doug or? All right. So we got discussion information on the village garage update. I got who's on that.
So, this is sort of a tag on to the previous agenda item related to the brownfields issue. As I mentioned in the email, I was made aware and had a conference call regarding funding through the USDA Rural Development.
With a population of just over 3,000 residents, Dawntree, Vermont is the home of Johnson State College, a small public.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me still?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So I was made aware of a grant opportunity through USDA through their community facilities program. That's a potentially good source of funding to put towards the rehab of the village garage. Because of Johnson's socioeconomic makeup, or primarily I should say economic makeup, we are eligible for a 75% grant, which is quite good. Really hard to find 100% dollars a lot of the times, especially for this sort of facility project. But the idea is that we would be rebuilding the village garage if we were going to pursue this grant, which is due by mid-December, which is a very short timeline. It doesn't give us time to figure out a new place for the village garage. So we'd really be, making the decision if we were pursuing that grant to put the garage back where it is. I had a conversation with Melanie. I've tried to have I've made several phone calls to folks at USDA, Act 250, as well as the state in terms of the environmental questions, and I have not gotten any answers yet. But that is all in the mix of trying to make sure that if we were going to rebuild the garage where it is, especially if it's in the exact same footprint, could we do that without reopening an Act 250 permit, without having to jump through a lot of other environmental hurdles? My gut tells me that if it was in the exact same spot and maybe using the exact same pad or using the superstructure and just rebuilding from the ground up, that we may have the ability to do something quickly without a lot of regulatory hurdles. Obviously, if we were going to move it on the site or be digging in the ground any great degree, I'm quite sure that Act 250 as well as other environmental issues would need to be sorted out. And I don't think that's something that we could get sorted out by the mid-December timeline. So that's really, I think the big question is is the board ready to move forward with, is the board ready to move forward with trying to put the garage and rebuilding it right where it is? Or should we hold off because we're not ready to make that decision because of the discussion about wanting to do other development on that site? That's for tonight. I need to know, should I pursue the grant opportunity, or do we want to have more broader discussion about what we're going to do with that parcel before we even pursue funding to put the garage back where it is?
Yeah. Do y'all catch that? Okay, so my thought is if we got the grant, we got December, we got the deadline, stuff like that. If the footprint, I mean, I wish Troy was here, but I mean, if the footprint of that garage would work, for the equipment we have and the equipment we got coming, I personally think we should move forward with either rehabbing that building, or whatever you said, leave the skeleton and replace what's failing there currently, or start from the pad up and rebuild whatever needs to be done to make that building work now and down the road. I'm very much in favor of moving forward with using the same location.
Hey, Meredith, does Troy feel that that will work? I'm sure you've talked to him about that.
Yeah, I think he's skeptical that in meeting with Peterson Consulting and looking at the site, that the opinion is that slab can be reused. I think, he is worried because it's right near ledge, that there's probably water flowing right under the slab, which is what's causing the moisture to come into the building. But if, we kind of get the sense that we can put it right back where it is, I don't think the location or the size of the building is really the limiting factor. It's more just the conditions in that particular location. So I think if we get the opinion that we could rebuild there without causing the exact same issues we're having now, I think that's a viable option.
Do we know what caused all that mold? Do we know what caused all the mold?
Is it this week they're coming out, Meredith?
Yeah, so Troy is meeting with Peterson Consulting tomorrow morning. They're coming out to do their site visit. They anticipate being on site for about 2 to 3 hours, just looking over the building, looking over, the area around the building, and just the sort of general, the layout and the surrounding areas in terms of water and environmental aspects. Mold is caused by moisture. So there's moisture in the building. We know that there's condensation from the roof. We know that there's a leaky roof, I think, at this point, but we also need to understand if there's moisture coming up from the slab itself. And that part is not as easy to figure out. But what we've discussed with Peterson Consulting is that they're going to give us every information they can determine from where the moisture is coming from, and the moisture is what's causing the mold.
I mean, obviously you don't have the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just as well, actually, you probably don't know anybody else, but so I mean, if we use the same footprint and the moisture, obviously, to answer your question, it's like she said, it's moisture in the building, where it's coming from condensation or it's coming from the pad. But if the pad is an actual issue, if we were to vapor barrier the current pad and pour on top of that, I mean, that shouldn't impact anything with Act 250 or any environmental concerns or anything like that, right? We're just making an improvement to the current pad. Scott's shaking his head yes, so we're all set to go. Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of making that material that's causing the problem better. So yeah, so that will, I'm assuming it's probably all of the above for this guy's causing.
Hot-headed widow searching.
Catch that. So okay, so back to the question. Are you in favor of trying to move forward with this grant opportunity we have and fixing the situation that we currently have?
What if we, as a joint board, decide to develop that whole area into, some kind of business leisure, like what's in the report? What if we decide to do that?
Personally, I think where the buildings are, where the structures are, services our town and our village well. I'm not in favor of moving the garages for potential business at the end of Railroad Street. That's my thought. Are you guys in favor of looking into removing the garages to be able to?
I think our cheapest way is to keep it there and rebuild instead of moving it and have to deal with everything.
And you're talking about using the Jewett property and up there, it's not even at 50 approved yet.
I can't see taking the location where it works well to try to.
The only concern I have is the brick, you know, with flooding and being stuck on the other side, but that's been that way for a long time.
That's 27. Steve, do you have your thoughts or of trying to improve the entire infrastructure of the village and town to try to put some business next to a rail trail?
Well, it would be nice if we had the information from the inspection tomorrow to make our decision. I don't see why we couldn't have both there, develop the river in the future for a site along there for recreation and have the garages kept where they are, so.
So if we move forward with the grant process, Meredith, we don't have to accept it, or, you know, we can back out of it because it's not gonna cost us anything.
I would assume so. I don't think they can force us to take the money. You know, you might get a little bit of a black eye if you went through the whole process and then sort of backed out, but, and, you know, I don't think it's a done deal in terms of even, well, let me back up. If I get sort of the thumbs up from you to keep pursuing this, then I will keep reaching out to USDA and Act 250 and the environmental folks at the state to see if, you know, if we're able to stay in the same footprint, reuse the same slab, if we have to, you know, put a barrier down or can just reuse it the way it is, you know, is that allowable? I think that's the next hurdle. And once I get that question, then there's the grant hurdles, which are we have to have a cost estimate for the building. And I believe we also have to engage an architect as part of that grant process and have some sort of agreement. So there's a lot of work to be done in the next, you know, 5 weeks or so. But if I'm hearing, you know, correctly that you want to pursue it, I will do everything we can to, you know, keep marching through those questions. And if I get to a barrier and say, no, it really doesn't look like it's going to work, it's not feasible, I'll obviously let you know.
At this point, Meredith, I'm seeing a consensus in the majority of the board to say move forward and Godspeed.
Thank you. I'll keep you updated on what I learn. I've left 3 voicemails on Friday and another 3 today, so I'm hoping to get some answers.
Thank you so much.
Can I just ask Ryan a question?
Yeah.
If the board wants, can we do a joint meeting at the next select board meeting?
It'd have to be a special meeting. I can't imagine you guys want to have a joint meeting in conjunction with the regular meeting, would you?
We might be willing to. I really can't weigh in on that. Agendas are determined by the board chair.
Yeah.
So I can offer the suggestion, but I can't commit the board to any particular action.
So yeah, same as we just left it before. You know, reach out to the board and Wednesdays and Fridays, right? Wednesdays and Fridays are best for us. So.
And I can, he specifically was asking about in conjunction with our next meeting, I can ask.
Okay.
Yeah, just because I know we discussed it for 20 minutes. I think it may take 20 minutes for them to decide whether or not they want to work that site. And then we can meet jointly after that to discuss forward.
All right, perfect.
Yeah,
all right.
I'll ask.
All right, so we have a water and sewer permit for 36 School Street. Reflect the change in use of the building, going from the yoga studio to a 2-bedroom apartment.
Yep. This is just a pretty basic change in use. It's not an increase in allocation, so it would just be approving preliminary and final approval for water 140 gallons per day and sewer 210 gallons per day.
Good for a motion?
I make that motion.
Okay. Any questions? Need a second on it?
I'll second it.
You got a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Said motion, signify with an aye.
Um,
Aye.
And chair is an aye, it's unanimous.
The building looks absolutely beautiful. Go see it. It's really, they did a really nice job.
Yeah, I agree. It looks real nice.
You're trying to say look bad before.
Oh, no.
Okay. I just didn't want to be picking on it. So NATO well update. Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. We're moving up here this weekend.
Thank you, Maureen.
You're moving up. Okay.
All right, so I just wanted to give an update. No decisions tonight, but I wanted to share some information that I found. So I reached out to the state regarding, the concept of canceling that lease and no longer having the NATO wells our backup well. I was told that having a backup well is not a requirement of the state. We would need to notify the state if we do get rid of that well, because it would be a change of our permit. So they would need to issue a new permit for us. But it's something that we are allowed to do. It's not a requirement that we have one. Well, it's not a requirement that we have one. Dan and I both feel like it's very wise for us to have a backup well. You know, if our main well were somehow contaminated, if we didn't have a backup well in place, we would have no way to provide water to the village. So neither of us feel like that's a position we want to be in. So there are two options to move forward if we do end up canceling the lease. We can have just an emergency well, which is not permitted. It's physically disconnected and it doesn't have to be monitored. So it would really just be an emergency well. If it was put into use because something happened to the main well, there would be a do not drink order. So it'd be sort of comparable when we have boil water notices that the backup well is not something that's tested or monitored, but people could use it to, flush their toilets and you have to boil it and that sort of thing. So that's an option. That's, I think, probably the least burdensome option. And then the second option would really be to do a wholesale replacement of the NATO well. So we would have to get a source permit and a construction permit for a brand new, fully functioning backup well that's connected to the system that we monitor monthly like we do with the NATO well, and sort of could be a wholesale replacement for the main well. So that's the plan moving forward, or the options moving forward. Again, we don't have to have the backup well, but Dan and I both feel very strongly that we should have something in place. So if we're inclined to cancel that agreement, we feel like one of those two options should be pursued.
So you may have just come up with a solution. I did speak with Mr. Nato, and he was looking at wondering if the state would be willing to release some of the requirements of as well. So it sounds like if we were able to talk him into allowing us to use the well as a backup well, an emergency well, that would release the state requirements on that well.
That is a very good question, Will. So the requirements, I think they're most onerous for the NATOs are our source protection plan. And I would have to clarify whether or not this sort of emergency non-permitted well would still be covered by the source protection plan, which puts this buffer, around the well saying these are the things you can and can't do within this buffer. So I can go back with that specific question. If the answer was no, emergency well isn't included in that, then yes, I think potentially that is a solution.
I think that's the next step. Let's find out the state if the emergency well is required to have the source head protection.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then find out what requirements it would have so that we can bring that to Mr. Nato and see if we can strike a different deal that works for both of us.
Yep.
Alex on.
Yes. I don't know if he's listening still, but that sounds like.
Can you unmute himself? Do we have to do that?
No, there you go.
There you
I'm
go.
here.
Hey.
My technical.
So you obviously were hearing what I was babbling about here. Does that sound like it's worth moving forward for you?
Yeah, just make sure that source protection area, that big blue paintbrush is gone.
Okay. All right, so we'll do the legwork, we'll have Meredith do the legwork on that, and we will get back to you as soon as we know. Is that okay?
Yeah, we'll be in touch and appreciate your time. Thank you very much, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so next is, and I assume that kind of puts us in the next phase, Meredith, where you're okay with everything now?
Yeah, I think that's a good next step. And I guess, hopefully the answer, like Alex said, will be no, it doesn't have to be in, and we have a hopefully relatively easy solution. We have to figure out how to, disconnect the NATO well and do some, just update the state on what our changes are. But that seems a heck of a lot simpler than having to find a new well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Are you taking questions from callers?
No. If they're here, we'll talk to them.
Okay.
Sign Vermont municipal bond loan agreement for River Road ejector station in the amount of $345,000.
Okay, so I have a loan agreement. This needs Will's signature.
We've already authorized me signing this, right?
Last month we signed the planning advance, now you said sign the actual. Exhibit C, the majority of the board to sign. In this resolution and certificate, names the board to sign.
No, Rosemary offered a pen.
I know.
I can stop down in the morning, Rosemary, and sign those if you want me to.
It's just gonna be a majority, right? So you're off the hook. You come down sign if you want. Once we got 3 on there, we're all set. So that's, you're all good?
Yep.
Okay. AARP winter space making grant. Letter of support for grant.
Well, actually, I don't need a letter of support. I found out that it's got to be a grant that is from us, but I am the one that's going to be writing it with Kyle. And I just need your, I need you to need a permission to apply for the grant.
Okay, this is the first I've heard of it, so can you explain what?
So, I attended the winter space making Zoom meeting, and you can apply for a $4,000 grant. And what we're wanting to do with it is on Legion Field to, during the time that it's an ice skating rink down there, we want to do stuff with the pizza oven. We want to put lights on the pizza oven, the bandstand, buy fire pits for people to warm their hands, and benches. We'll buy sleds for kids to go sledding. So it'll be a winter space making event all winter long.
So it's not an event, it's
a winter long.
Winter long.
Yep.
Okay, has the skating park, the skating rink, has that been, do we know if that's been set up or who's doing that, or?
It's Brian Rollinitis that does it every year in conjunction with the fire department. They go and flood it, and he snow blows it and takes care of it.
Okay, so I know in the past, the fire department's taken care of flooding it, stuff like that. Now, they've been reached out to this year to make sure that they're gonna be doing that this year. Okay. So this whole thing kind of revolves around the skating rink?
Yes.
Okay.
So the grant, does it cover costs throughout the course of the year or just the initial cost of some of the stuff?
No, it's going to be for the whole
For the
season.
whole thing?
Yep.
Does it cover the electricity for lights and stuff like that too, or is that to be taken on by the town?
I would think it'd be taken on by the town.
The town has an opportunity to weigh in on this item.
Okay.
I can offer a little bit more context for that.
Okay.
The town is also pursuing a grant through recreation for this same funding source. And that's why, when I spoke to Dee, it seemed like it might be a good fit, since this is something that's really kind of village center. Actually, green is still a very village related activity, so it seemed like something that might be supported by the village, while the town is making an application to the same source for a different
project. Okay.
So this was a grant, like I asked, if the grant was for the initial costs are for the whole thing, and you mentioned the whole thing, but it's not, it's for the initial cost. The whole thing would be the town, like electricity and anything else.
Well, I mean, in the past, it's been Brian Rollins who has put up the ice rink.
Mhm.
And the fire department that has come and flooded it. That's a given.
Yeah.
So the lights, putting them up, buying the sleds, putting up the benches, doing the fire pit, getting the wood for it, will be on the grant.
Be on the grant.
Now,
Okay.
paying for the lights, I hadn't thought about it,
Okay.
and I would think it wouldn't be all that much. I don't know.
And then insurance.
Depends how long they're on.
Yeah.
They're recovered.
So you're
Yeah.
just asking for permission to be able to write this up for a grant.
Exactly.
Right. It's a $4,000 grant.
I would motion
And-
that we allow it.
Yeah, I'm right with you, but I'm just gonna ask a couple more questions. So obviously the sleds, I mean, I don't know how much you've worked this out, but are you just gonna leave the sleds in Legion Field when people are gonna use them, or is this gonna be something that you have to sign up to
No, I don't think
take?
it'll be that regimented.
Okay, so the sleds will last a couple of weeks, and then the park benches and stuff like that, so those are some of the proposed will stay throughout the entire year, I'm assuming.
Sure,
Hopefully.
or I think, I was thinking that because we, some people do different activities on that field, we could always move it to the Arboretum in the summer, because they want benches. They
Oh.
would like donated benches, so that's
Okay.
a possibility. I
Okay.
haven't really gone that far.
Okay. Lights, pizza parties. Okay, so I'm gonna entertain Kenny's motion. Anyone raise up?
Motion that we allow Diane write up the grant to get this project for the winter place.
I'll second it.
Okay, first and second, any questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, motion to allow Dee to apply for 4,000 grants for the trustees of the village.
In your name.
In our
In
name.
our name.
Yeah, signify with an eye.
Aye.
Aye.
And chair's eye, unanimous.
Thank you.
Godspeed.
Good luck.
And Green Mountain Access TV equipment, my understanding this is gonna be a simple one. My understanding is that you're loaning us equipment, but you want us to be responsible for it while it's in our possession.
Yeah, so I'll try and be a little clear. A couple updates. One, we did gain some equipment recently, and the second thing is regards to a YouTube channel that would act as your archive. I had been trying to coordinate with Meredith for a while to be able to transfer that over, and I think just to make it easier on everyone, I'm just going to generate a new one, and then we'll start using that as the repository. And when Meredith and I can kind of sort out some of the past videos for archival purposes, we can upload those into the new account. I spoke with Brian last week mostly about when we start to do these installations. There hasn't really been any formal contractual agreement with most of the towns that we work with the equipment that we get you. But given that the room that you're working in is, as far as I understand, not under a security protocol for like a locked room, we just ask that any of the equipment that we install, because it's a community resource, if it were to be damaged or if there was a security issue with theft, that we kind of coordinate a way to be able to replace the equipment, so that the community can continue to use it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There have been some questions that came from Brian that I can kind of relay to you, but if you all have questions right now that you'd like to have me address, I can also do that.
If Brian had a comment or a question.
I was gonna say, it's not that this room isn't locked and secured, but it is that the keys for this part of the office are a very different protocol than the keys for the central office of the vault house.
So how much equipment would be left here and vulnerable versus, like, you take the laptops and stuff downstairs, I'm assuming, from the office after you've done meetings? Yeah, I was gonna ask that same thing. What's going downstairs and what's staying?
It would be talking a little bit about putting a lockbox in here, some kind of secure cabinet or something like that over here, so that we don't have to take things up and downstairs all that often. The laptop and some of the things have generally been left up here now that we have a laptop that was aged out of regular use. You know, that's something that would be up for recycling, but it still runs Zoom.
Okay.
You know, it doesn't run much else, but it can run Zoom, so we're not taking that one up and downstairs at all. And we haven't had any issues with it.
You have any concerns about people walking off with stuff up here?
No.
Okay.
I think, but placing it in a locked storage box is a good idea.
Kind of like, can you?
Yeah, all of those.
Yeah, can you work with Brian and come up with a solution for that? You okay with working with Rosemary with this lock solution?
I believe that Michael has an option that we were talking about bringing up. So.
Okay, so Mike or Michael?
Mike, yeah, Michael or Mike, yeah, either works.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, part of the equipment that we would be putting in would have a lockbox. It's fairly small though, so it's budgeted and it's going to be included. I'm not entirely sure if it will include everything that's in that room right now, including microphones and cabling, but we do have one kind of coming with it. I can coordinate with Brian or with Rosemary to figure out, if we should just go with a larger one to include everything. But in addition to that, we've also budgeted a computer. Currently, because there's this spare laptop, we're going to try and just use what's there, what you all have. Brian had kind of asked for an estimated, equipment cost, and it's somewhere around $5,000 for everything, whether a computer is included kind of or not. We're just budgeting kind of higher to pad into the future. Like if that laptop dies on you all, then we will have the ability to sort of replace it pretty quickly.
All right. I have a question for you. Training wise, with setting this up, how's that going to go too?
Yeah, ideally for each board, and BJ, you are kind of the liaison that you've volunteered for. I would walk you through kind of a formal training to be able to understand it, and then ideally we're trying to kind of whittle it down to something that anyone without any tech experience or is not tech savvy can kind of navigate. And that would kind of be where I'd ask for you, BJ, for feedback. Like if you're going to work with me and I can train you, if you see any hiccups in something where you're like, oh, no way is so-and-so going to be able to figure that out, then we can kind of tweak that a little bit to make sure that it is accessible for folks.
Okay. I got one question for Brian. Town, do you think they're gonna have any issue with covering the cost if something happens to the property that they own this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
It's something the board hasn't had the opportunity.
Everything else is going on, but you're not getting the sense they're gonna go, we can't do that.
We are interested in something similar, and I doubt we're going to get a better price than a donation that we just have to replace it.
If you get better than free, you let me know where.
Yeah.
I want to double down on that.
Odds are if we have it in the lock cabinet, our insurance for the building would cover it if it was stolen.
It is unlike, they would have to steal every last piece of it or even the rise to where it's up.
I understand.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to cover this good man's equipment that he's loaning to us in case something happens to it.
Motion to take on GMTV's equipment and replace it after it's lost, stolen, or anything like that.
Second on that.
Second.
You got a first and a second, any discussion? All makes sense. I'm gonna call the question. All those in favor of replacing GMTTVC, whatever it's called. If we damage it, lose it, break it, or whatever, all those in favor say it's aye. Aye.
Aye.
That's 4, chair is aye, it's unanimous. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And are you here for other business or just reliving old times? Perfect. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
No, we have a new meeting.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, Diane has other business.
Well, we had an applicant, so I want to know what happened to him.
Oh, yeah.
We sent out an email, BJ and I said that if we got a third person, we would entertain a night to interview him, but I didn't hear back from anybody else.
Do you want to do it the same night you're doing this other thing? I would think Joe last like 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. Let's do that.
Other thing.
When was that Meredith wants to sign for the Belleville Transco?
Yeah, we need to do that before December, right? So let's pick we're gonna pick a day for that. Start with you, BJ, because you're the hard man to deal with.
Any Wednesday, Friday, it's good with me.
Anything but this Friday.
Yeah, this Friday I'm busy too.
Yeah. Not this Friday. So we got 17th. Yeah, I get it. Okay, we do the 17th.
Yes.
Steve, you do the 17th?
Yeah, I can do the 17th.
That's 3. You say you do Wednesday, so he's good. Kenny, 17th, okay? Yeah. All right, so you meet after the 17th and announce it, please.
What time?
Well, hell, it's dark at 4 o'clock now, so it doesn't really matter. You guys want to do 6 o'clock?
That's good.
That's fine.
All right, so 6 o'clock on the 17th. Got 2 birds, 1 stone, hopefully.
Is that to discuss or have an interview?
Let's do an interview.
Yep.
And then I have a couple of questions for Meredith.
So what's your question for Meredith?
So the powerhouse demolition, that contract was, what was it? Did they do everything that they said they were going to do in the contract? Like, what's left there? Were they supposed to take care of that? Was that in the contract?
No, so the concrete that's left there would have been an additional charge to remove. And there's the potential that it can be reused as fill on the site. And so we determined that we would leave it in place rather than paying somebody to take it away. And that if we could reuse it on site and save the cost of having to haul it away, that would be a better decision. So no, there's nothing undone with the contract.
So nothing is contaminated in that pile?
Gosh, I'll have to go back through my notes and see the specifics of that specific concrete. I cannot remember if that, I think that because it could be used as fill, there wasn't any concern about it, but I don't want to say exactly what it is until I look it up. I can get that information for you.
That would be great.
Sure.
And then, do you remember when August 9th, I think, Seth came and talked to us from the CPC, and he said that there was grant money, $20,000 grant money for stormwater, I think, like near the library.
Yep.
And he said if we didn't apply for that grant, he was going to give it to somebody else. So are we applying for that?
Yeah, that I think I reported on that a month or two ago that we've moved forward. Dufresne Group is supposed to be doing that work. They're working directly with LCPC. It's not a contract with the village, but I believe that's all underway.
Okay, and my last one is, and I guess it's for you too, Diane. Like, do you guys feel like you have enough time in your workday to write other grants? Because I am concerned that there is so much grant money out there and it's not being applied for. I would like somebody to help you guys do that kind of thing.
Don't we need projects to apply for a grant?
We have projects that we should be applying for.
What
And
about
that's the
money
way
to
grants
pay the
work.
person?
Do we have the money to
Pay the person?
or to pick up the leftover portions of the grant?
Well, we have leftover money from Meredith, and we have some money from the linemen that we, so there is some money, and I'm not just talking, our year ends and we can put it in the budget also, but there is so much grant money. And there
Right,
are
but-
so many projects.
Yeah, but to get a grant, don't we need a project proposal with a plan to move forward?
Depends
on
on
it?
the grant. Some grants are meant for, there's all kinds of different levels. I mean, Meredith's done us, very well with the grants and stuff that she's applied for, gotten, and, I mean, it's not like this is something that's not being done.
No.
And I mean, I'm not
I'm not-
100% familiar with what you, but I know I've heard your name attached to a few projects.
Yeah.
Where you've applied for, gotten grants and got things done, so,
I am not saying anything negative about Brian and Meredith. I think they work really hard. What I'm saying is that I think we would benefit greatly by having somebody, an economic development person that will know where the grants are for the projects that we need to have done, in addition to what they are doing. I know they work really hard. And I'm not being critical of them. I just think it's beneficial to the town and the village to hire an economic development person that writes grants. Because we have the projects.
Right, but what we would decide on that change nothing to the town because they would purchase get their own grant writer.
There's nothing saying we couldn't look at a joint,
But then it's
joint
conflict
grant.
fighting for certain grants.
I don't think there's any conflict with town village.
I thought that's what was the issue with the last time we had one network.
No, there's other things, but,
I would.
I think that'd be something we definitely should look at our annual, we start doing annual budgets, some of that. I mean, I'd love to defer this to the time when we actually start talking about funds. Does that make sense? We could agree, we could agree with you right now, we can shoot it down today, but I think until we look at the finances, we can't really move forward with it. So I'd love to defer this to put it on our agenda for when we do our next year's budget.
I mean, that would be better than not at all.
Well, I mean, we can't do it now. We don't have any funds to bring anybody in. So, if you, I mean, I know you gave some sources, but you also got to remember that we weren't flush with money to start with.
Right.
So it wasn't like this, we have this surplus of money that we can spend or can spend.
Well,
So,
if the select board, and I'm willing to talk about it, but definitely put it in for next year's budget. We will definitely discuss it for that.
absolutely.
But
I think that's
in the
a great
meantime,
time.
it might be nice to discuss it with the board to see if they might do anything.
Would you do us a favor and just bring it to your board and see what their pleasures are? See if they're interested in entertaining talking about a joint grant writer?
I can, maybe when we're talking about joint meeting agenda, this could be suggested.
Part of it, just to feel it out. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not making decisions right off, just to feel it out.
Thank you.
I'd love to hear what Scott's gonna say.
For the annual reports for the village and the town, I think what would be beneficial. The grants we've applied for and the grants that we've been rewarded, you have to really sort of go through the minutes and different pages in the annual report. Would be nice just to have a section. For the village and or the grants we applied for, and the grants we've actually received. Because that would have a really good indication of, what have we done this past year? What have we got? And what's our success rate? Yeah. And that speaks volumes. It would be a separate section within the annual report.
Meredith, how long would it take you to put something together like that, just to say, kind of pat yourself on the back type thing?
I mean, I could certainly go through the last few years or the last 5 years since I've been, was with the village, of what we've applied for. And well, I probably didn't include in the reports what we applied for and didn't get. I probably only included what we got. But I'm sure I could come up with a pretty good list of grants that we've gotten. Speaking to the bigger issue, there definitely is an influx of money with the ARPA money and now the infrastructure bill. There's a little bit of a gap now between all these reports about all this money being available and actual grants and programs that you can apply for. On like the water and sewer side, we've heard over and over, oh, there's $100 million for water and sewer projects. There's just a few things that the state has put out to date that says, okay, we're ready for people to start giving us project ideas or apply for funds. A lot of it is still very much in the development phase. So I just don't want you to think that all of these grant opportunities have passed us by. Dad and I on the water sewer side are trying to pay attention to everything we see coming from the state. But I think there's still a little bit of a time gap until a lot of that money is actually hitting the street and you can actually apply for that money. I just wanted to.
They're cut out of it before they can ever release it to anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
So Meredith, do you think it would benefit you or us to hire somebody in addition, in addition to you?
I certainly, like you said before, I think having more assistance is great and would be helpful. I just wouldn't want to see us apply for so many grants and then not have the internal capacity to actually implement the projects for which we get money. Smaller grants or things that can be done with volunteers, that's great. But once you get the money, then there's a ton of work, just with like the Pearl Street sidewalk project. We got, about $50,000 or $45,000 to do that project, which was about half of the cost. But there's a ton of internal work that goes along with it. So I just don't want to lose sight of, somebody can write the grants, but there has to be people to be able to implement those projects. And so you don't want to have so much grants out there that you can't actually get them done.
And very rarely these grants without co-pays. So, you've also got to have that in your budget. Grants are grants, but there's nothing for free. So we got to consider that. We could apply for, $100 million worth of stuff, and it's going to cost us. It's going to bankrupt us getting the money.
And Meredith, do you think there's a lot out there that you haven't been able to get just because you're so busy, or are you pretty much on top of all the grants that you're able to get for what we need? I mean, or does it value bringing somebody in for a full-time position of trying to get these grants?
I definitely would say that there are some grants that we haven't applied for just because I didn't have the time to deal with it. Those would be, I think, grants that would be nice, but not critical. So I've always focused on the critical infrastructure, the water, sewer. There really aren't a lot of grants for electric. But so that's really been my focus. I think there would be room for somebody who's looking to do more of the nice things on the green, or like you're talking about the Legion Field. And those are a little bit smaller projects that probably aren't quite as intense in terms of the workload that comes along with them. So I guess I would say in terms of the really key infrastructure for the village and keeping that all up to snuff and trying to get grants for those, I've tried to stay on top of that. And I think whoever takes the village manager position would have the capacity to stay on top of that. But more of the maybe more community development type of grants that aren't utility specific might be where more attention could be put. That's just sort of how I tried to prioritize in terms of critical infrastructure, and that's where my attention would go. another thing is, it is a little bit hard to keep track of all the opportunities. I mean, you really have to read every single email and, from VLCT, from all the state departments, from nonprofits. There, when there is a lot of money out there, you don't know quite where to look for the information sometimes. So having somebody who's, out there searching for that versus having something come on your lap might be beneficial. Having somebody out there, really searching for the grant opportunities.
Right, and you guys would also be in basically the same scenario, she was just stating that you can get all kinds of grants, but it's hard to have somebody implement them one or the other.
It depends on what you're doing with the grant, and like Meredith described, that some of the grants are a good fit for your volunteer communities and for residents. Others you need professional support for. There's really a whole spectrum of it. And yeah, I agree with Meredith that we're getting our kind of our core focus done pretty well, but that leaves a variety of other topics that we might be able to, well, it almost certainly is more assistance out there than we're getting, but it's a return on investment. It takes a certain amount of administrative time to try and collect it, report on it, and if it's not an essential function, probably do.
Yep. All right, I'm looking for one motion. Motion to adjourn. Second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are clear as. Thank you, everybody. 8 o'clock.